Hello there friends, I wanted to have a bit of a longer video discussion with you about how to grow nutritious, delicious, organic watermelons that are juicy and crispy crunchy and that are really yummy and healthy. So how can we grow the best watermelons that's possible to grow at home?
So that's watermelons. They love to grow in a free draining, rich, loamy, somewhat sandy soil, but make sure that it's got a real good mound of built up organic matter, that it's got lots of food there as it grows, and then you're going to harvest some wonderful fresh watermelons, the juiciest, tastiest thing on a summer's day. Hey guys, I wanted to show you this little watermelon patch that I have happening here. Look at these little beauties that are growing. It's just bringing me so much joy. Some nice bigger round ones here that are starting to develop. There's also these two. Hello, you little babies. And another one growing there, and another couple. Let's see if we can find the other smaller ones in here. Another small one there. And so all in all, I have growing there several watermelons happening in this little patch. Now I haven't grown watermelons very much yet, but I'm really enjoying learning to grow them. And usually it's because of space limitations. Watermelons really need a great open space to spread out, obviously because they're a large sprawling vine like pumpkins are. So what is the best way to grow watermelons? Let's have a look at that together. I've chosen here to use a large section of lawn. Watermelons do grow really well on bare ground or on gravel even. Some put it, I mean, obviously there are fields of watermelons commercially, but if we're growing them at home, basically we have to find a patch in the garden where there's a lot of space. It's the same deal as with pumpkins. They need to spread out, they need full sun, and they're going to grow pretty quickly. The whole life cycle is done and dusted in about 90 days, 3 months. So it's not a long time, but you need to be able to apportion that space for them. I'm putting 1 or 2 vigorous plants together. This one behind me here is just one single watermelon plant, and that's producing several watermelons, which for me, I'm already happy with that. And that's probably taking about 5 by 5 meters of space, roughly 25 to 30 square meters when it spreads out and gets quite large. And this is how I've done the planting for the watermelon. I've had basically a mound here that I've started with, and this is a giant donut. It's a mulching donut. In this case, it's for a little mango that's growing up. It's kind of like this big mulch donut here behind me for the soursop. I've started with a mulching donut, which is basically I've put in there a nice big round donut of compost and then a bunch of mulch, leaf mulch on top of that. And so that's what I've started with over here. I'm growing a local island apple, which is a very special fruit. I've already done a video on that. And that island apple is growing there in this big mulch or compost donut. And here is basically the root of this one large watermelon plant. And that watermelon has spread out on my lawn. I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of lawn to be able to grow watermelons or pumpkins, because they are quite special. I grow a lot more pumpkins, regularly grow pumpkins, because we love cooking pumpkins. And so I thought, I've got a whole bunch of compost happening there already. It's breaking down to feed that tree that's going to grow up. Why don't I get a season of watermelons in there while we're at it? And it is summer, a great time to grow watermelons. Now watermelons do need lots of watering as they grow, and they need a fair bit of feeding. And as they grow up and then start to spread out, and you see those beautiful little yellow flowers on the tips of the vine as it spreads, you need to keep watering that every couple of days and make sure that the ground is moist, but obviously not too soggy. and having a good thick layer of mulch underneath the plant before it's established is a good idea. And then as it spreads, you want to make sure that you're feeding and fertilizing it as well, because as those flowers develop, it's going to need all the nutrients to build the watermelons that it needs. Now, if you've put a massive big compost mound together and it's feeding on that, then it won't need as regular a feeding. But I like to give plants that grow vigorously and are producing food, I like to give them a good liquid fertilizer on top of the compost that I've given it just as a foundation for its growth. And so I've been liquid fertilizing this every 2 to 3 weeks while it's flowering and spreading. It is said that watermelons love to grow in sandy soils, and so if you've got a heavy clay soil, it may struggle a little bit. You want to loosen it up, create a mound, and then maybe put a little bit of sand in with that if possible. It doesn't really need it, but you want to make sure that you've at least have a lot of rich organic matter in there so that the soil is free draining. And these vines do like to grow on mounds because the mounds tend to be a little bit warmer. They warm up from the sun and also nicely free draining. So what kind of food do watermelons need? Well, they need a good amount of phosphorus, so make sure if you're fertilizing that it's a good ratio with phosphorus in it. And if you want to use organic compost, and obviously break down some manure until it's really well rotted and add that into the foundation as you're doing your planting. But as it's growing, the best you can do is some sort of fertilizer teas, some liquid fertilizer, and obviously keep watering it and make sure it's moist, because it is a watermelon. It's going to need a lot of water. Toward the end of the cycle, as the watermelons grow and get a little bit larger, then you want to basically back off the water as they're fully grown and allow the sugars to concentrate in those watermelons so that it doesn't taste too watery. Now, some say that watermelons do lack taste if they're low on magnesium or boron, so that might be remediated by putting some Epsom salts with borax as a liquid fertilizer on the plant. But most soils have a fair bit of magnesium, so I think you just want to make sure that it has trace minerals. So you could add a little bit of borax, a teaspoon of borax in about 20 liters of water, and make sure that when you're feeding it with a liquid fertilizer that that liquid fertilizer has trace minerals and not just NPK, because if it's missing any trace minerals like zinc or any others, then it's obviously also not going to taste great. Another thing I love to do when I'm doing my liquid feeding is to use obviously a great fertilizer like from Nutritech Solutions that has not just NPK but all of the traces, and also fish emulsion, which is also going to have a little bit of sea minerals. But I like to make sure that I put some seawater diluted in with the liquid fertilizer, so that there's also all those traces from the seawater. And if there's a little bit of salt there in the mix, apparently that's going to make the watermelons taste sweeter. But make sure from your soil test that you're not too high in salt if you're adding seawater.
Okay, here going into the watering can, I'm taking some good quality liquid fertilizer. So that has NPK plus trace minerals and some fish emulsion. So I'm just putting in probably a quarter cup of that. And then I've also got a teaspoon of borax here to go in, just to make sure there's enough boron there. And I'm also going to grab here some seawater from a large 20-litre bucket that I keep my seawater in. And I'm going to put in about 200 mils, not quite 250 mils, into, this is a 14-litre watering can. So that's pretty low, that's just a few percentage of the sea minerals. It's not really high. I think you want to go up to about 5% sea minerals in your watering can, so maybe 500 mils in 10 litres. And so that watering can's good to go. I'm going to stir that up, and then I've got some good fertilizer with a little bit of extra boron and a bit of extra sea minerals to go on my watermelons there. Let's chuck that on.
And I'm watering this at the base of the plant, right there at the roots. And it doesn't hurt to spread that as a foliar also a little bit wider on the whole plant, but you want to get most of that fertilizer right there on the base. So I'm getting it on that base. I'm going to put it over here on the other one as well. Some good fertilizer. Well, this watermelon patch is growing, and the first watermelons are getting quite large, quite juicy, and really starting to tell us, hey, come and eat me. Wow, nice and solid. So that's one big one. A couple of these other ones that were quite small now growing large and getting ready to harvest. All of them are a bit creamy underneath. Wow, quite solid. 1, 2, 3 big ones. A fourth big one, that's definitely getting ready for harvest. Wow, quite solid there. And some other small ones growing. I think it's probably preferable to plant watermelons and pumpkins and fruiting plants into ground, into the soil, rather than just straight into compost. If the compost is really aged and it's only several centimeters thick, then I think the plants will root into the ground, into the soil. But ultimately, I think yeah, growing in pure compost encourages the tips of the plants to be a little bit too high in nitrogen, and it breeds a lot of these bugs, which I'm having trouble with here. There's lots and lots of these orange bugs all over the tips of these plants, and then they're getting eaten up, but still quite healthy growth and very productive. So I think it did root into the ground at some point eventually, but it's that's quite a good watermelon patch, and I'm really happy with that. So we're going to harvest this soon and chop it up and show you what it looks like on the inside. It sounds very solid. It's been raining here constantly, so I think it's not short on water at least. What a beauty. Wow. All right, here goes. Wow. It is actually quite tasty. So fresh. And we definitely had to harvest this very soon. So that's watermelons. They love to grow in a free draining, rich, loamy, somewhat sandy soil, but make sure that it's got a real good mound of built up organic matter, that it's got lots of food there as it grows, and then you're going to harvest some wonderful fresh watermelons, the juiciest, tastiest thing on a summer's day.
And really nice with some salty, crispy popcorn. Yum, yum.